All, good afternoon to all of our listeners, and then welcoming all our participants into this studio. So, first, we're gonna do a small introduction from about all of us, and let's start with Mr. Iain Clark, our honorable guest from Scotland. Hello, Iain. Would you
Hello.
like to introduce yourself a little bit for the audience and us?
Yeah. My name's Ian, and I have been involved in music for pretty much all my life, certainly all my adult life, although I was only professional for a limited period, and most people will probably may or may not know that I was the drummer with Heep on the Look at Yourself album. But I've done a lot of other things since then. But I'm looking forward to coming over to the Heep vention in 2.5 weeks' time, I believe. So, that's me.
Thank you, Ian. And then we move on to our other foreign guest, who's Trevor Hensley from United Kingdom. Would you like to introduce yourself to us?
I'm very lucky because Finland, as you know, for health reasons, is like my second home. Ian, I'll explain that to you separately, but it's because it's quite a long story. But
Okay.
I'm sad that I can't be with you this year. But unless there's a change that might happen next week, and if it happens and it's positive, I'm going to do everything I can to come up. But right now, I've been involved in music in some way, shape, or form for longer than I care to remember. And my dad made me my very first guitar when I was 9. That was a long time ago. And Ken and I have worked on and been involved, as you all know, on music for a long, long time. And we've got lots of memories to share with you. And so ask any questions you like, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And then we have Leo Mustonen, and he is from the Uriah Heep Association. And because of him, we are having this interview actually. So please, Leo, tell something about yourself, and then also maybe you could kind of like open up a little bit of the Heep, Uriah Heep Association past, and what's it all about in Heep Pension.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I am. I have been a couple of years running this association in Finland. That happens to be the only official Uriah Heep fan club in the world. There are unofficial ones, lots of them, and we are in contact with them all the time. But actually, Uriah Heep Association started in Finland more than 20 years ago. First, it was informal, and some 14 years ago, it was officially registered in Finland. And we have been organizing Heep pensions and other. They have been having other names like Easy Living in Salo and others like that. For I think 8 times we have. This is the 8th event that we are organizing. Plus, we have been doing, of course, when Uriah Heep is playing in Finland, we try to organize meet and greet with them, and especially when Ken was touring Finland, and he has been here many times, very many times. Then he always had this meet and greet, and he was signing the albums and all of the kinds of things with the fans. He was a lot with the fans, and but this event that we are now organizing is mainly to serve as a memorial service for all the good people that have already left this earth, and the music that will stay here forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so, and then I guess I have to introduce myself also. So I'm the one who was late from the meeting already, couple of minutes, and that's why I look like a secretary handling all my papers here and kind of like a mess around me. But my name is Tuula Halén, and I'm pleased and honored to be with you guys here. And it's all due to Uriah Heep Association, who usually always like to use us Golden Stage people to create the event. And I've been involved a couple of times already doing the Heepvention, and my background also is among the music, and I work lots of with the bands and also the financial side. So that's why I'm kind of like here talking with these guys now, because we are actually now going to go through Iain Clark's amazing history, and it is a long career, and it's going to be really interesting. So Iain, you don't even know yet what kind of questions you're going to have. So yeah, we're going to start. Let's start with your past, kind of like the early years. So your early years started already year 64, and when you started studying to become a teacher. Would you like to tell us something about those years, and especially your teaching years in London, year 68?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's an easy question to deal with. Thank you. Obviously, 64 to 68 was a very interesting time to be in London. And I think those that saw the previous live stream event where I spoke, I talked about some of the stories of the early days there. But yes, I trained as a school teacher, English and physical education. And then I moved back to London, where I was born and brought up, and taught in one of the toughest schools in London, in Notting Hill. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, but actually the call for music was stronger than anything. And so I decided at the end of my first year's teaching, I wanted to see whether I could actually make it in the music industry. And I did. And like a lot of people in those days, struggled for a year, virtually starved, lived on things like cold baked beans and slices of unbuttered bread and anything else that you could eat to stay alive. But the feeling of, if you like, not having to work, but actually just spend all your time making music was something that was absolutely wonderful. And then I struck it lucky. I joined a band called Cressida, and that band basically recorded one of the very first albums on the Vertigo label, along with Rod Stewart and Black Sabbath. And I was with that band for about 2.5 years. And at the end of that, we split up, of usual stories, not getting enough work, basically, to keep us all going. And as bands in those days always did, looked in the Melody Maker to see the adverts, and there was an advert for a drummer, and I phoned up, and I can't honestly remember who answered the phone now, whether it was Mick or whether it was David or whoever, but basically whoever it was said, "Oh yes, we remember you," because certainly Cressida played with Uriah Heep on at least one, if not two occasions. And so that was a lot easier. And I went down and did an audition with them. And before I knew it, I was in Uriah Heep. And everything changed from that moment onwards. It was a different musical experience altogether. So that was kind of my early years. I don't know if there's anything else you want to know about that tour.
Well, actually, you were a professional musician year 68 and 72. But then what happened because of you then totally changed your career? So first you were a professional musician for 4 years, but moved on to something totally different, which is really interesting. You started as a youth and community worker in London again. And that's really interesting. I would like to hear your kind of like a solution why you moved on.
Why I did that? I kind of I got fairly disillusioned with the music industry, the music business, for all sorts of fairly well-known reasons. It was very much run by people who were lawyers or wore suits and really didn't relate to the musicians and the artists themselves. Plus the fact that I had not set out, it wasn't the only thing I wanted to do, and I trained to be a teacher. So when I decided to come out of the music industry, I couldn't go back into a classroom. That was just
Yeah.
to be too restrictive. And I answered an advert in a London magazine for somebody to go and help out at a summer school for disadvantaged young people. And I phoned up and said, look, yes, I'd be quite interested. And I went down and helped out at a summer school in Fulham in North London. And whilst I was there, the chap that ran this youth centre basically said that he was leaving and going back to Canada, where he came from. And I was then asked if I would like to take over the job and work full time as a youth and community worker. And I did. Again, it was still a very interesting time. I think a lot of the kids were somewhat bewildered why I had been in Uriah Heep and playing in fairly large venues around, and then suddenly had decided to go work in a youth and community centre. But I got a great deal of satisfaction, and in many ways that kind of set me off on my career, if you like, over the next 2 decades. Didn't for one second regret anything that I did in music, but I suppose it was fair to say it wasn't the only thing that I wanted to do in my life.
Yes.
So when there was an opportunity to change direction into something that I really was also very interested in, I was happy to take it. I was lucky to get the offer to change direction, if you like.
I have to say that we are really pleased and happy for that, because being a member in Uriah Heep is a big thing. But then what you've been doing after it is also something really super. So you kind of like put together the young ones and the music, and you decided to make a career for yourself out of it. So I think we kind of like go through your history, and then we will stay later on and start chatting more, because I can see that Leo and Trevor is there, like, we have lots of things to say and lots of things to ask. I think we're gonna be there soon. So let's kind of like go past your history and come to today also, and start talking about the music industry and everything. But now we move on after your 10 years in London. Then you did a dramatical move, and you decided to move to Scotland, Highlands and Islands. And that was your first community business built by yourself. And it was called the Firish Trust. Would you like to tell something about it now for us?
The reason I moved to Scotland was because the singer in one of the bands I'd been in London, in Cressida, he lived in the Highlands, and I came up and stayed with him on a couple of occasions, and I was incredibly impressed with the nature of the community up there. A lot of interest in music, a very strong kind of collective spirit. I was just explaining to Trevor and Leo before this started that one of the things that I noticed when I first came here was that there was this very large farmhouse on a hill just outside, a place called Dingwall, where people would turn up every Friday and, if you like, stay there for the whole weekend and depart again on the Monday. And there was equipment set up, there was a PA, there was a drum kit. I taught a number of people the basics of drumming, and a couple of them went on to become drummers themselves. And it was just really a very interesting a place, if you like. The whole community was interesting. And coincided with me feeling that I really wanted to get out of London. I'd had enough of, I'd born and brought up, and it was a beautiful part of the world, and it was some interesting opportunities. So I basically decided to quit my job and, sell up lock, stock and barrel, as we say. And I moved to the Highlands, and fairly soon after that, I set up what became the very first community business, which basically meant that the business was owned by people in the community, and the profits that were generated were then ploughed back, and in this particular case, into the arts. So we were promoting arts events, programs, and we also set up a small music centre to provide teaching and training and support for young musicians. And this would have been back in the sort of early 80s, 82, 83, something like that. And it was really a fascinating time. And again, really set me off on the next 10 years of what my life and career would be.
Yeah, that is something. So the Irish Trust actually is still going on. I just noticed that they are still doing fine, and the trust even has the 7 million sterling assets under management, which is brilliant. And
Right.
what they do is that they provide training to young unemployed and developing an arts and music center, which is amazing. So,
Yeah.
so that's a brilliant thing that you've done. So now after that one, we're gonna move on because you have a long story behind you.
Yes,
And
I'm sorry, it's so boring. Yeah.
but you should have been here earlier, like a couple of decades ago already talking about these things with us.
Yeah.
So it's brilliant to have you now around us. So anyways, the next one is then that we move on to the years 91 and 98. So, did I skip something? Actually, I did.
No,
No,
that's about right.
sorry,
That's right. Yes.
it's like Albanet Limited you built up.
Yes.
Yeah, would you like to tell about Albanet now? It was an IT research company.
I think I'll before I talk about Albany, I will just go back and talk about what happened when I left the Irish Trust, and that was I was headhunted to set up the Association of Community Enterprises for the whole of the Highlands and Islands, which is a huge landmass and includes Orkney and Shetland and the Western Isles. And I mean, I found that really a fascinating experience. And whilst I was there, I discovered computers. These were very early days of computers, pre-IBM PCs. I wasn't interested in how they worked. I was just very, very interested in what they could do. And with a friend of mine who was developing systems to link remote communities using computer communications, we piloted, we became the first organization to use computer communications to link remote rural island communities. And that was, very interesting in many ways. And we used it to provide remote support and training to isolated communities around the Highlands. I was the director at Ace High for about 3 years, I think. And then I decided I was going to set up my own company. I had, for the previous 10 years, always worked for voluntary committees, organizations, and such like. And although I was usually the founder and the director or the managing director of these organizations, I'd never actually owned the company myself. It was always community owned. So I set up my company, and that was Albanet. And that was in 1991. God, it's a long time ago now. That was really, if you like, another very significant development, because with Albanet, we very quickly got into big European research projects. These were, if you like, had been set up in order for us to look at ways in which the new digital infrastructure could be used to support rural communities. So these were big projects, multi-million pound projects, usually lasted 3 years. They were multinationals, so we had partners in, I think, 11 or 12 different European countries. And that involved the telcos, the major telecommunication companies, the universities, research organizations, public bodies, and so on, development agencies. And we'd work on these major projects in what was called telematics in those days. So this would have been the mid-90s. One of the projects that we did was a project called MODE, and it stood for Music on Demand. And it was a project that had been designed by Norwegian partners, and they approached us. We had worked with them on different projects and said, would Albanet be interested in coming and working on this European project? And because it was music, I said, I think we would. And basically this project was looking at ways of, if you like, downloading and streaming digital audio. One of our partners was Telenor in Norway, but another partner was the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, who developed MP3. So having them as part of the project, and they were the developers of the MP3, algorithm. They're part of one of the patent owners, if you like, of MP3, and they were a project partner, and that was fascinating. We learned a great deal working alongside those people. And at the end of the project, Telenor decided, their venture capital arm said, we would like to set up a company to develop some of the technologies that we were involved in. And I was then asked to become the chief executive of that company. We initially were based in Amsterdam because we were a European company. And then we transferred the business and the company to London. And that was really the start of the latter part of my career, which was as the chairman of Mode International. And in effect, I was back in the music industry again. Having left it decades before, I suddenly found myself back there talking with, the heads of the major record companies, traveling around Europe. My chairman was a chap called John Preston, who was the chairman of BMG, and also the chairman of the British Phonographic Industries, BPI, which is the sort of industry association for the record companies in the UK. And John and I would travel around, and he could open the doors to the heads of all the major record companies because he was well known. And so we had some interesting and fun times, to be honest, because John was a lovely man who died, far too early, very suddenly, just a few years ago. And we became very good friends even after, he was no longer involved in Mode. So talking to the record companies, 99, 2000, we were saying, this is 20 years ago, streaming, downloading is coming. We knew that. We'd been working on it for a couple of, several years prior to that. And people have to remember that in those days, there were 5 major record companies that controlled a $40 billion industry. You had Sony, EMI, Warner, who else? Universal and BMG, and those were the 5 major record companies. They've now come down to 3, I believe, at the last count, because they buy each other out. But these were in this was when people were just starting to talk about streaming and downloading music, and we were right there at the very beginning. They, being the major record companies, thought they could control what was going to happen. They had done it once previously when cassettes were first created, and they managed to get all the hardware manufacturers, many of them in Japan and United States, to pay a levy on every single cassette player that was made. And that levy was meant to go to the industry, to the artists. Didn't quite get very much to the artists. A lot went to the record labels, but that was in order to compensate for the fact that people could copy their LPs and their vinyl records and redistribute them. They had controlled that. They had managed to basically get the industry, the manufacturers, to pay a levy. They thought they could do the same with digital downloading, but we now know that they failed miserably because an organization called Napster came along, and suddenly Napster changed the game along with Apple, when Apple came and sat down with all the heads in the United States, the heads of the majors, and said, we're going to do this whether you like it or not. And they buckled. They said, fine, as long as we get some money. And really that was the start. And now we just take for granted streaming, downloading. But back in those days, we would demonstrate streaming a 44 kilohertz full CD quality track from a server sitting in Oslo to the south of France at the Midem Festival, where we were demonstrating to the industry that this technology was coming. It's now history because it's now everywhere.
Thank you, Iain. That was a long thing, but now can we go a little bit back into the history again? Because there were a couple of things that are so interesting, and then we can keep on talking with all of us concerning the music digitalization and in distribution and everything about the funding and all. But I forgot totally to talk about Scotland also. Let's make it kind of like now we are kind of like in a heavy stuff already. We're talking about the music industry, but let's have a little talk about Scotland, because of then people might even more understand that how close you've been with the young people, young musicians and everything, and also the similarities we have in Finland if we talk about Scotland and Finland. So I don't know how many people do know that Scotland is a country that has almost as much population than Finland has, so 5.5 million people. And the highlands and the islands are really isolated, and it's rural areas, and the population is only 600,000. So what you've done while you've been there, and this association of community enterprises in the highlands and islands of Scotland, that's been amazing job. So you have actually been doing computer communications to provide training and support to remote rural areas. So it's kind of like the same thing that we are having here in Finland. We are spread it out. There's only 5 million of us, and most of the people are living down south. So it's kind of like our down south is your lowlands. And then our Lapland and kind of like the middle of Finland, we could say it's the highland. And then we have the islands like Ahvenanmaa and Åland or whatever. So it's kind of like, similarities somehow. So I find Scotland really fascinating, actually. And just to kind of like tell all the people that I also found yesterday out that the national animal for Scotland is unicorn. I thought that it's a joke, but it's not. Iain, you have to check it out for me. Is it a joke or unicorn? We have a score. So
Right. Okay.
what's going on?
Yes, I honestly don't know, Tuula. I really don't know. Especially as a unicorn, as far as I remember, is still a fantasy creature. Although, who knows? But I will go and look it up. But coming back to your point, I mean, I'm really looking forward to coming to Finland. I haven't been to Finland. I've spent a lot of time traveling and in the other Scandinavian countries, in Norway and Sweden and Denmark and so forth, and on business and in projects. In many ways, I expect Finland to be very much like the Highlands of Scotland, particularly in terms.
Email like you do have your minister there. That's she, which is also kind of like fascinating that we both have the same. So you have there as You are actually living in Inverness, aren't you? The capital of Scotland.
I'm just, it's the capital of the Highlands. I'm about 50 kilometers, 45 kilometers north of Inverness in a small town called Tain, overlooking the North Sea. So you could sail from just down below my place and just keep going, and you'd probably arrive at Finland at some point, a while down the line. But yes, I mean, the work that we did with the association really was it came about by necessity, but it came about because we had the infrastructure was starting to be put in. The Highlands of Scotland had a digital telephone network before any other part, any other region, and certainly any other rural region in Europe. And so therefore we had a test bed to develop. I mean, I've got various things up on the wall here, various projects that we were involved in. And some of them, when you look back now that you're talking about, in the early 90s, we were piloting broadband. Well, broadband in those days was, Leo will understand this, was 264 kilobit channels bound together. And that's what we were using, if you like, to pilot using telecommunications and telematics in tourism, in health, in medicine, in transport, and even in music. So that, if you like, the distribution of music over a digital network was being piloted here and in parts of Norway, but Norway didn't really have, if you like, I hope I'm correct here, but didn't have the size of the network that we had in the Highlands, which is one of the reasons why they were so keen to come and talk with us to test out some of these technologies. So yes, but the other thing is that in very remote rural areas, it's incredibly hard to have a sustainable economy. You don't have the size of the market, you have poor transport, and therefore looking at ways in which communities themselves can take over and run essential businesses, whether it's the local petrol station or it's the shops and so forth, is actually critical for the future of that community. Now, I don't know whether that's the same in Finland or whether it is still held in a lot of private people are running key essential community services. But where you have a very limited market, it is very difficult to sustain that sort of economy. And that's why the association was set up. That's why we had this network of community cooperatives and community businesses that I, obviously I spent a lot of time working with, flying in very small planes and landing on beaches in some of the island communities in the Western Isles, or landing in fields in order to go and meet with the people that were running the small local shop or the petrol station, or running a salmon farm, or some sort of tourist initiative. And we then decided that we ought to try and look at ways of using digital network that was being put in place in order to provide support and remote services. And that's what we did.
Thank you. And that's why you also get your award, because, you started it out. And then because of the association work and the community work, you then decided to build up your company, Albanet. We also already talked about it, but we forgot that your company received a great award, and it's called John Logie Baird Award. And you received it because of you developed a remote control software, which is amazing. Would you like to tell about that award, and also tell the background of the award, that who actually was Mr. John Logie Baird?
Well, John Logie Baird was a famous inventor and was responsible for inventing the television. And he was a Scot, and this award has been set up to mark innovation. And a friend of mine back at the time when I was still at running Albanet, he was a computer whiz kid. He was just brilliant. And I remember coming to the office one day and I had found some commercial software that would enable me to take control of somebody else's computer in a remote location. Okay, Microsoft Windows now has it built in, but in those days, there was one product you could buy that would enable you to take control of a remote PC. And I said to my friend, I wish I could go to multiple PCs at the same time, because we had a network, if you like, of people that were all, receiving support. And he was a very quiet, shy guy, and he went away and came back about 6 weeks later and said, "Do you remember that idea that you had?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I'm not there yet, but I think I think I know how to do it." And he created, if you like, a screen where he had 4 separate little mini screens of computers that he was connected to. And I said, "You're absolutely on the right track. Let's keep going on this." And that's what we did. And in the end, he had created some software that had the ability to simultaneously link to 16 other PCs over the ISDN network at the time. And we had people from IBM and all over the place coming to see us in Scotland to see what we were doing. And then completely unexpectedly, we were told that we had been entered into the John Leahy Baird Award for Innovation, which we won. So that was something else. Like a lot of things in life, the big boys come in, they look at it and go, "Okay, somebody's now shown us how you can do it." I remember one very senior manager, director of IBM, who'd flown from New York to see us demonstrating. And there's lovely stories of people that arrive in Inverness and they say, "Can you take me to this address?" Not knowing that it's a 5.5 hour car journey to get there. And it wasn't quite that, but it was one of those sorts of similar stories. And he was very curious about how we developed it. And I said, "Well, I came up with the idea. My friend here, Mick, he actually built it." And he said, "We once tried to do this, and we put 5 men on it, and they couldn't come up with it." And he said, "Quite often, it's one person that has the genius that knows how to make that work." He said, "We had 5 of our best people trying to do it and didn't do what you've done." But that came out of what we were doing, which was trying to link up remote communities. It was a natural, it wasn't just a good idea we came up with. We had a purpose for doing it. And now you can buy software that does that. And it now, as I say, comes bundled with Microsoft, and it's available now, over the internet. So there's nothing unusual about it, but it was the first of its kind.
That's amazing. And it has to be said that always it's so that the best innovations come out the real purposes. So
Yeah.
that's brilliant what you've done. And anyways, all those years that you saw, you learned, and you realized that what is needed, and then you made it. So pleased. It's great. And now it's kind of like time to go towards the mode again, because now I think there's lots of things for Leo and Trevor also to kind of like, to have their input in concerning
Please.
the yeah, otherwise we're kind of like
Please.
talking. I need something to drink also, but anyway, so should we go back to mode? Kind of like, it's really interesting, the whole background. And like you already told us that it was like a pre-Napster and actually like a Spotify. So I think it's kind of like, now it's the time to talk about, how we feel about it, and, the goods and the bads and, whatever, what we noticed, and about the music business anyways during today. How do we see it? What's the great big differences? What are the bad things because of it, and what are the good parts of it? So would you like to, Trevor, start talking there something for us? I'm kind of like, Trev.
I'm still here.
Hello.
I promise you I'm still here. I found that absolutely fascinating because the evolution of technology through the years has been something that I've followed very closely. For a short while, I was involved in graphic software, and I watched the development from having a black screen with green text on it to screens where you could actually display millions of colors, and it's fascinating. But I mean, for me, your question, Tuula, was interesting. You said, did I see any bad things in the development of technology? And I'm a big user of technology, so I have, as you know, I've got twin daughters, and they're 16. One of them is currently studying, and she will go into computer science at university because she sees the advancement of AI and where that's going to be applied, and she sees it very much as the future. Me, because I'm older than she is, I see some risks in it, but then I also like conspiracies and things like that. So, but the whole what we mustn't do, and Iain, I am very impressed, and I think incredibly impressed with your achievements, because it's to do what you did and go from a band that was incredibly successful. And remember, I was around in those days, and I remember the album "Look at Yourself." It was just, it blew everybody away. But to then have the strength to change direction and go do something completely different, I think that's really impressive. For me, I just wanted to be a footballer, and that was all I did. I went to school, I came home, and I went to football training. And when I left school, I went to work and came home and did football training, and that was all I wanted to do. The music side of it came later in my life, and that's something that I don't have real regrets. But if I look back on my life, and I think that I would have spent more time with my music, because I see what it did for Ken and all of our friends in the industry. And I maybe, if I'd have stuck with it earlier on and actually learned to play my dad's guitar properly, who knows where and who knows what would have happened. But then it came to me later, after my little incident in Helsinki back in 2013. I got much more involved in music, and as you know, because I was lucky enough to come up and see you guys and very regularly. And all I will say, Iain, is you will have fun.
Great.
I promise you.
Forward to it.
And for me, it's I've seen the evolution of technology. If we're still talking in the technology side of it, with I remember my first proper six string was an Echo Jumbo, and it was something that actually The Wizard was written on it. There you go. Ken came up to see me, looked at it, went, "I'm borrowing that," and off he went with my guitar. But he wrote The Wizard on it, so that's cool. But that was a big clunky old thing. And nowadays that they've got these new technologies, they've got what are they, graphite that they put on the surface. It's just fascinating. Technology is everywhere, so we really need to embrace it and acknowledge that it's here. And look, what are we doing today? Iain, that you are partly responsible for this.
Okay, I put my hand up. Yeah, it's my fault.
You are, though, aren't you? Because you were in that early stage of technological development. I mean, look at MP3. I have a phone here with 2,320 songs on it.
Yep.
And I mean, that's unbelievable.
Yep.
And when you look back at, you mentioned IBM. And when you look back at what would that have been, mid-70s, when they bought their storage things, they were like boxes the size of a huge washing machine.
Yeah.
And it's just fascinating to see how it's evolved, and long may it continue.
Tuula, can I come back and say something which I think, to directly answer your question? I think, Trevor's absolutely right. It's the pace of development of the technology which is taking everyone's breath away. As far as the music industry is concerned, I talked about when we first started speaking with the major record companies, back in the days when Mode International was getting started, and they controlled a 40 billion. They are no longer as powerful as they used to be. And the sad thing is, neither is music as powerful. A lot of the major record companies are now turning into entertainment conglomerates who are making as much money from games as they are from selling music. Okay.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, so that's one thing. But the other side of it is that the independent sector of the music industry has grown in strength. And one of the reasons for that is it's what some people call the democratization of music. In the early days, you had to get a deal with a record company to get a record made and for them to then distribute and market it for you. That was all our dreams, a record deal. If you had a record deal, you thought you'd made it. Well, we found out that wasn't necessarily the case, because it still had to sell in enough quantities that even the record company had to give you a bit more of the money that they would be taking from it. Today, young people, young creators, music creators, can make absolutely perfect quality recordings in their bedroom.
Yeah.
And not only that, they can get it directly to the market. So some of the things that we are looking at doing in the charity that I'm working with up here now, in the Highlands, is how you can create new pathways for creators of music, young people, to get their music directly to the people, cutting out the middleman who always slows it down, takes their slice, and then passes it on. So that process is something that is now happening quite a lot. And there are, particularly in the area of syncing, where record companies in the United States are actually wanting to get content from young musicians who can deliver 30 seconds of a piece of music to fit this particular set of video or film. And they don't want to deal necessarily with the record company that may own the rights, with the publishing company that may own the rights. They want to get directly to the artist. Why? Because it's cheaper. But it also means that the artist gets a bigger stake of the money that will be generated, because it's not being shared with all the other middlemen. So I'm just saying that's one of the things that I think is changing for the better. Where it will go, who knows, because the technology is just, we can only imagine what it's going to be like in, say, another 10 years' time, how we get, what the music industry will look like. Sorry, Trevor.
No, absolutely. That's such a valid point, because and it leads me into, if you like, if it's okay, Tuula, for me to pick up on this.
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
But when you mention about avenues and where they can get their music out, and until relatively recently there weren't many, and it was one of the reasons that we set up Red 5 Radio. Ken and I were talking before he passed about he lived in Spain on a lovely farm, and they built a small house which they were going to invite new musicians who wanted help with their songwriting, or musicians who maybe were struggling with addiction issues. But the main thrust was to promote new music, because that's that's the future, as you know, Ian. That is the future of this industry. Well, sadly, Kenny went and left us very inconveniently. And I sat down here thinking, well, we can't let this project go away. We can't. What was that, Tuula?
No. I'm kind of like, trying to say that look at ourselves now.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah, you go ahead and we can, talk about kind of like the foundation side and financial side more. But Trevor, sorry to stop you, interrupt you.
Don't worry. I just caught the mirror, so
Yeah.
it's interesting. But I sat here and I thought I didn't want the project that Ken and I were working on to just go away. Now, I don't have his musical gifts and that, but I asked myself a question: what if I could set up a radio station, and part of the objective of that radio station was to promote new music? And look, we're a year down the track. I started it off. I had 4 new bands on the first show, and now every Monday the show is 2 hours of independent music. And you'll know this, Ian. The quality is just
Amazing.
Outstanding. Yeah, and I now need to expand it and somehow get more artists in and do more shows. So that's my next challenge. So.
Don't worry, I'm gonna fill you in. So
There you are.
and all the MP3s coming. So yes. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, Ian, concerning about the bands and the life of the musician. But I have to kind of like say that I see that there's somehow at least some problems also. It's great that we have the technology. I've seen it also, growing and coming and going, because I've been working on the financial side since year 84. So, I've seen the coming for telefax. It was so amazing. And I saw the telex and I was using the test keys in the bank, places, and everything was without the technology. Then we were so pleased when we got the Reuters. And then suddenly we were in Bloomberg. And then we had all the screens in front of us and all the changes. Those are brilliant. But I have to say that something what I miss is, of course, that I'm a true rocker, kind of like. I love stage acts. I love performing. And now we have lots of bands that they come in and they do the 30 seconds. They do the MP3s. They have 3 songs. They put them out to Spotify, YouTube, all over the places. But it's kind of like, it's a totally a different world than the old-fashioned band had. So, they need to show their performance skills and to be able to take part of the festivals and things like that. So we have now like 2 different parts working on the same music industry at the same time. We have those people who really do want to have kind of like the old-fashioned way of doing things, but then they have to combine those with the new technology. And then we have all those people who only use the technology as an advantage. But I have to say that I'm so happy when I've been following all these bands. Also, Golden States we've been having and seeing a lot, and we've been always working for the young ones, young musicians, and we had this kind of like thing going on that we don't care about how many fans do you have or how many followers do you have in Facebook or Insta or whatever. We believe in music. So, if you do good music, we are ready for you. And that's one of the things that why I look really up for one of the bands who've made it really well as a do-it-yourself band. And that band is called The Last International, and they are from New York, but they've done everything on their own. because they had the problem with the record companies. They wanted to change their names and they wanted to change their style and all kinds of things. So what do we need is something that Iain, your foundation, has already started to do. So now it's kind of like, easy way to move forward about the fund world, the kind of like foundations, what they do, how they can help musicians, how they can, give you the skills needed, which are the typical skills you need when you build up an enterprise. You need the marketing, you need the social media, you need to brand yourself, you need to know the administration, you need to know the bookkeeping, you need to know all of those things because, in my opinion, our young bands, they are companies and they are startup companies and they need the same world than the normal kind of like, not creative startups are having. Our bands are pitching all the time. They are on the stage. They do their thing there. And that's pitching just the same way that you go and do your elevator talk and then you have the investors there thinking about investing on you. So there are lots of possibilities for our people today as long as they know their possibilities. And before we move on to the fund side, because I would love to hear you, Iain, tell us about your fund. And the fund is called, let me see, it's called Liam Colgan Music Fund. But before we jump into that matter, I just want to kind of like, have something funny in between. Of course, because we are actually having pretty heavy talk. So we don't want to lose you all our listeners because we are kind of like getting so serious. But now and then it's like, look at yourself. And this is actually the vinyl record where Iain is playing. Even though we have Iain here, well, let me see. Iain is, no, here.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Thank you. How handsome you still are, actually.
Oh.
But then, Iain,
Excuse me, what about me?
Iain, would you like to tell us why your name is not in the record? Because people have been asking from me that Iain Clark is playing in Look at Yourself, but there's nothing about Iain except the picture.
It's very simple, Tuula. Very simple.
Yeah.
I was signed to another manager for the previous band I was in, and when I joined Uriah Heep, he wanted 25% of all my earnings for doing absolutely nothing, and I said no. And I raised it with Jerry Bron, and I said, if I had my name on the album, I think he has a right to take some money at the moment. I'm under contract. And Jerry said, that's easy. We just don't put your name on it in the UK. So if you look at the American vinyl and those in other territories, you'll see my name is on there. But those certainly in the UK and perhaps other parts of Europe, it was left off deliberately because I really didn't feel that, it was right that my previous manager could take 25%. We had no idea that it would turn out to be a million seller, but I'm even more pleased now that my name's not on it for that reason alone.
So now you have your vinyl in the United States saying that Iain Clark is playing here for the reason.
Yeah, no? Absolutely. For the right reasons, yes.
Okay. So, hey, now it's time to kind of like, move on. So 2006, you decided to retire. Mm-hmm. And what is all about? What did you do while you were kind of like not doing anything? Tell us.
Do you know what? I went back and played drums again. I played in local bands. I did what I love to do, which was to play drums. And I played with two other guys for the best part of nearly 20 years in various lineups. And we ended up being in a trio called Twisted Blues, good guitarist Roger and a good bass player Bobby. And I knew that I was coming towards the end of my playing career. I knew that. I've always sort of wanted to say, I want to get out on my terms before people start saying, you should have seen him a few years ago when he could still play. So I thought the only way I can do that is to actually go out when I want to go out, not when other people, particularly not when other people say to me quietly, I think it's time for you to kind of step down. So, but we decided to go to New Orleans to record an album. The band was called Twisted Blues. It was just a trio. And in 2016, we went to New Orleans and we recorded, thank you, Trevor, perfectly timed, Twisted Blues. And then shortly after that, a friend of mine, whose son had been tragically killed in Hamburg in 2018, approached the guitarist in the band, and the guitarist approached me and said, why don't we donate that CD to raise money for the fund? And I said, great idea, let's do it. But it didn't stop there for me, because I'd set up organizations in the past. I was the one that basically was asked, could I set up the charity and put all the bits in place, if you like. And that's what I spent the last 3 years now doing. I'll be bringing some of the CDs over to sell at the Heep convention in order to raise some more money for the charity. But we're basically looking at ways in which, as I said, we can bridge that gap, particularly between schools and the colleges and the universities and the industry itself. And there is this big gap. And the reason it's there is a lot of young people may have gone to university, may have a degree in music, may have qualifications, but have very little understanding of what life is really like in the industry. And more importantly, what employers are looking for, whether they're involved in, staging, lighting, equipment hire, publishing, or the music business side, or the whole technical support side. And we're looking at ways in which we can bridge that gap by providing workshops and courses to help young people transition from education into the real world of work. And that's what we're doing.
That is really interesting, because my daughter Lulu is at Cambridge Regional College.
Right.
And she is studying music.
Right.
But one of the things that when she said that's what she wanted to do, I went to the college and looked at what they were going to do. It's not just about performance. It's about mastering. It's about production. It's about mixing. So she will come out of there. She can already perform. You can see her on my Facebook page. She's got this cool little band, a little blues band. Oh, by the way, can I just say that album is excellent, Ian. I play it, and I've already played it on Red 5 Radio. So you're getting some public anyway. But
thank you, Trevor. Really appreciate it.
What was really, really important for me with the college was they had to give them a broad overview of the music business, because it's, as you know, probably better than a lot, it can be a very dirty business.
Let me tell you a story very quickly. That I was talking to a colleague of mine up here who provides, we have a university locally, and they have a very, very important music course. They also do provide training and, if you like, education on other aspects of the music industry. But there was one occasion when they brought up a particular specialist, a well-known audio engineer, who came up and spent time talking with a group of audio engineering students. And in the course of that, he was telling them what life was really like, how what their normal working day was. We all know what that's like, in the studio at late morning and still there the following day is not uncommon in the business. At the end of the presentation, two of the group of 8 or 9 young people said, I had no idea it was like that. I don't think I could do that. And they were in their final year. Wow. So they had been there for 3 years without actually understanding what life was really all about. And when they did find out, they went, no, that's not for me. I don't think I can do that. So it's more important to kind of get some of that knowledge to them at a younger age when they're still thinking. A lot of young people go into study music because it sounds like it's great fun.
Yeah.
But actually don't have a better understanding. And even though they will teach it, some of that is actually fairly limited, because the university's job, let's be clear, is to get people through their courses.
Without a doubt.
They are concerned about what happens after that, but it's almost like somebody else's problem. And we're trying to be the person that steps in and goes, okay, we'll take it from here. And we've also got relationships, if you like, in the industry itself.
That is something that is truly needed. I always talk about here in Finland, when I talk with people about the musicians and the bands and everything, that we actually need a soft landing space. It means that when you have done your studies and you are ready, you need to go and actually get in the touch for the real world. And then you actually know, and you should do it already beforehand. And that's why Golden States, we've been loving to have all these music technology people inside, also kind of like, testing their skills and learning how to use analogical side and digital side and everything. And here I have to say now that we go back to your fund. And there is this one sentence, I love it. Even though that we know that the charity, the fund came up from a sad thing. It's an independent charity setup you've done. And it's born out of great sadness, but one that opens a door onto the healing power of music. And I just love it and I adore it. And I would love you to kind of like, we've been going through about the fund you are holding, and they have the missions, they have the values, and then you have also workshops and courses, and then you have the awards. And it's kind of like that there are three different categories you are taking care of. You are taking care of the individual side, the ones who are in music but without the kind of like higher education. So you kind of like, you have all these different awards. Would you like to tell about those awards and why are you having those?
Yeah. We think it's important for young people to aim for something and to be awarded, if you like, for recognition. Not necessarily the very best, but they have, if you like, clearly demonstrated they have worked hard, and they have achieved something. I mentioned earlier on that when I was at Mode International, my chairman was John Preston, and I mentioned also that he died sadly at a young age. One of the things that we did was that we set up this fund in his name, and we've now providing 2 awards at the university for music business students, because John was a music industry executive and one of the nicest people. And in a way, we've set up one for the best music business student of the year and another one for the best international student of the year. These are just a recognition. They are run by the university themselves. We just provide them with the money. We also run some of our own for young songwriter, for young musician. Some of them are, really closed, but we spend, we piloted last year running some courses in songwriting with a really, really wonderful Scottish singer-songwriter called Yvonne Lyon, who's also got her PhD in music, and she's a wonderful teacher and really been hugely influential in the way that she helps young people start with a blank sheet of paper. You know, the most frightening thing for a creator is sitting in front of a blank sheet of paper and the first word that you put on that, or the first line, or the first note you write on it. And she's developed some wonderful techniques to help get through that barrier. But the awards are important, but then so are the programs and the activities, and finding ways of bridging that gap.
Yeah. So it's amazing things you've been doing there. And I like the idea that you have the mentors. You have the group of mentors also there, which is totally needed, because you can be brilliant in playing music and doing music, doing the songwriting and everything, but you also give the opportunities to gain experience, expand knowledge, and develop skills in marketing, administration, media relations, and social media. And those are all so important for our youngsters, so to say.
Yeah.
So this is it's kind of like I can see that we could talk and talk like 2 hours or 3 hours at least. There's so many interesting topics we are having. We still haven't even gone through the financial side at all. So I think we need to kind of like if we do so now, that we go through the John Preston Memorial Fund also, because I think that that gives us more about you, Iain, also about your life together with knowing this Mr. John Preston, how you got in touch with him and used to him, and then what you did was that you really did help the widow out, Ross, and you brought up the fund, and now you're managing it as well. Would you like to tell about this John Preston Memorial Fund?
There's not a lot to tell, really. His widow approached me and said, look, I'd like to do something in John's memory, because I was a friend of his, and we, he'd been probably the best chairman that I've ever worked for at Mode International. Lovely man, and we became good friends after that. He was one of the people that brought the Eurythmics together, Annie Lennox and Dave Stewart, amongst many other artists. And so when Ros said, look, I want to put some money into a memorial fund, she asked if I would do it. And I said, yes, that's fine. So I approached the university and I said, would you be interested in having 2 awards? And they said fine. And I know that Ros is now moving on to increase what she's doing in his memory, but that's a sort of separate project that I'm helping her with too. I'm meant to be retired, but I don't know whether that is ever going to happen for me.
No, it's not. Sorry to say.
It's not, is it? No.
The problem is now that you're coming over to Finland, and you're going to be with us in Heep Vention. So it means that you won't be retiring, because we are true rockers and we love Uriah Heep music, and we love music. So there's so many things to do still, kind of like you, to make the life better, to make all those dreams come true that what our young musicians are having. So you are totally needed, Iain and Trevor, and also Leo. So I was planning to talk about the different financial methods also, but I think that it's kind of like heavy, and we are on Saturday, and people are kind of like ready to start going out. Sun is shining and everything. So should we kind of like try to end this somehow? I don't know. It just depends on you guys.
I think if we do end it, you should definitely do what you're planning on another day. I think there is a real need for that. Do it on another occasion, and on the back of this, and I'm happy to join you for some of that if you like. But I think this is really your area of expertise, Tuula. But I think it's probably is a good idea. I could do with a cup of tea, to be honest. So.
And I need some water, but yes. So I think what we do is that, because we seem to have kind of lots of things to talk, and going through your history, Iain, was the most important thing for us today, because kind of like showing your huge career, that like I said to you yesterday, that you have to be proud of being part of the great, amazing Uriah Heep, but you have to
I
be
am.
also proud of your whole career, because it's everything about music, musicians, and young people. And I really do admire your work, what you've been doing. And I'm really looking forward to have you over in Finland. And I think we should kind of like, have another one, Leo. We are begging Leo Mustonen from UHSF Association that can we have another meeting together with the same crew? What do you think? Do we have enough time? Let's say in a week's time or something?
We can have as many sessions as you want to. And of course, because this doesn't really cost anything. And I have a lot in common with you, Iain. I have been working with computer. I started studying computers in 1970 as a student. I was 16 at the time. I don't think many people at that age have started working with computers or studying them. And I started working as a programmer trainee in 1974. And I have been around in all kinds of things, but it's nice to meet somebody who has very similar experience.
Yep, we're both old.
But now we have so much to talk about and so little time. So let's save something for the next sessions. And I thank you. It has been a very lovely time to discuss and listen to you. I haven't been talking much this time.
It's
It's
nice
It's, for me, it's been
then. But hey, I have to say that because of all these IT things that we've been doing, all of us, Trevor, Iain, Leo, and we've been seeing the whole changes. So we could actually do a kind of like a one meeting with IT jokes. There's so many funny things that have happened during the years when we've been kind of like, seeing all these new machines coming up. Like somebody said to me once that you're never going to see anyone's face in kind of like, like this or anything. And the telefax, it was so funny when we had it, the whole stupid machine there. And I was doing all kinds of jokes with it. So there's lots of things we can talk. But before we go, of course, we need to do some advertising. Leo, don't try to sneak out of the door. We need to kind of like, hello, it's kind of like a Heep pension coming up. It's only 3 weeks. 14th, we are in Lahti City. It's like 1 hour's train drive from Helsinki. And then we are in 15th, we are in Helsinki City. So, you cannot say that it's too far if you're in Helsinki, because we are also in Helsinki. Haha. And then you cannot say it's too far to Lahti. If you are there in Lahti, you should be involved with us and Heinola people and Hartola and Mäntyharju and all the kind of like, up there in our highlands areas. Lowland people go to Helsinki, higher land go to Lahti. What about that? And islands, they should come to Helsinki maybe. So be with us. See Iain, sorry, Iain, I said it wrong. Iain, and see Iain on the stage with the amazing legend band we built together. So we have a pleasure to have in Finland with us Paul Newton, Phil Baker, Iain Clark, Russell Kilbrook, and then we have other groups coming over from Fair Islands. So we have Deiji coming visiting us. And then we have the first time ever Brotherhood of Wolves, which is really great and interesting to see because they are the last man standing right next to Ken Hensley. So those are the guys who worked with Ken the past years and made amazing songs. And there you can see Trevor showing it. Yes. So lots of interesting people. And then do not forget that we have our great Finnish cover bands also with us. We have the greatest Finnish one, I think, the Innocent Victims. And then we have Knights of the Black Ox, who are actually doing Ken Hensley production. And then we also have someone who's not doing Uriah Heep. That's for Sunday, and it's Wishing Well. So we have a bunch of almost 30 musicians with us. So, and all our other guests. So we welcome all our listeners, and we thank you participants, and we will be back, I guess. Yes. Okay, thank you. You want to say something, Trevor, Iain, Leo?
Yes, thank you, Tuula. I think I love the passion in your advertising, and I will continue to promote it here as much as I can. I promote it in every show so far, so I will keep doing the best I can. And if you want me to be involved next week, just give me the link or the time, and I'll be there. It's really been good fun.
I'm gonna use you, Trevor. I am going to use you. Thank you.
Okay. What more can I say?
What can you say? Iain?
Sorry, Iain. Leo, we need to talk about me possibly streaming a show into the weekend, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell me when it's convenient for us to hook up again? Maybe on Monday, something like that.
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trevor. Iain, thank you for being with us. It was such a pleasure to talk with you, and get to know your past. And I am so fascinated about Scotland also now. So I'm planning to move over because I want. Yes, I am. So my room ready. And
okay.
Okay. I always wanted to see the Loch Ness monster. Nessie.
All right. Okay. It's been seen 4 times this year.
Have you?
I haven't seen it.
I'm the one.
Yeah, you might be. There's a lot of other people who said they've seen it. It's very good for the tourist industry, though. Very, very good. So that you always get some sightings at the beginning of the tourist season, just to sort of tee everybody up for it. I'm being very cynical, but anyway, it's been a pleasure, and I hope I haven't sent too many people to sleep talking about my long career to date. And all I want to say is I can't wait to come over and see you and meet you, Leo, and you, Tuula, in person in under 3 weeks' time.
Yeah.
Okay. See you later. All right.
See you. Thank you, all the audience.
Thank you again. See you again soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.